When the substitute bell rang that drizzly Tuesday morning, I was already clutching the edges of my desk so hard the cheap laminate threatened to splinter under my fingers. Everyone in room 2 to 19 knew what was coming. Oral presentation day in freshman world literature. To most teens, it was a blip on the schedule, but to me, the kid who'd landed in Southern California from a rural Filipino parish less than a year earlier, it was a firing squad. Every consonant in English still scraped my throat like gravel. Every vowel slipped out wrapped in a melody that was normal back home, but comedy gold here. The class clown in the back row had already penciled a tally sheet. How many times would I butcher Shakespeare today? He wasn't subtle. He held it up so the whole row could giggle. And at the center of it all sat Mrs. Hawthorne. Chin tilted, designer reading glasses perched low, lips set in that half-smile, half-sneer she wore whenever I opened my mouth. The room smelled of whiteboard cleaner and wet sneakers. The fluorescent lights flickered, and I could feel my own heartbeat in the hollow just under my chin. Still, I had a strategy. Focus on the first 4 sentences of my speech, the part I'd memorized in front of the bathroom mirror until steam coated the glass. If I could get those lines out smoothly, maybe momentum would carry me past the rapids. I rose, notes trembling, and barely got through "Good morning" class before it happened. I misstressed the word architect as architect, and the room erupted. But what carved the memory into my bone wasn't the laughter. It was Mrs. Hawthorne's laugh, sharper, louder, the laugh that told the other kids mockery was not only permitted but encouraged. She didn't even mask it with a polite cough. She leaned back, one manicured hand pressed to her chest, and let the sound roll out until it bounced off the ceiling tiles. Somewhere deep inside, I felt an anchor snap. I stumbled through the rest of my speech while she corrected my pronunciation, publicly, after almost every sentence. By the time I finished, cheeks burning like open wounds, the chalky taste of humiliation coated my tongue thicker than any accent ever could. At lunch, hiding behind the dumpster, I texted my older sister Ray in a misery spiral. She replied with the same verse Mama had prayed over us the night we left Manila. He has made us one blood for all nations. Back then it sounded like comfort. Right now it felt like cosmic irony. Cultural Studies class was running a free ancestry testing unit in partnership with a biotech startup. Tomorrow, Mrs. Hawthorne's lit block would be finger-pricking right alongside me. DNA Day, the principal called it, citizenship, diversity, science all rolled into one. I wanted to skip school, crawl under every ocean between here and the Visayas, and start over. Instead, I went home, reheated adobo, and told my parents nothing. Mama hummed praise songs over the sink while Papa pored over construction job listings. I swallowed every word about the laugh that had shredded me, because a kid should protect his parents from the darkness they cannot fight. Biology lab buzzed like a beehive the next morning. Ziplocs of cotton swabs, little vials of stabilization buffer, shiny brochures promising you shared DNA with historical kings. Students Instagrammed selfies holding their test kits like golden tickets. I kept my gaze on the speckled floor until I felt shadow on my desk. Mrs. Hawthorne loomed with an antiseptic wipe and a smile so brittle it could cut diamonds. "Try not to faint, Mr. Ramos," she said, voice caramel sweet but loaded. For some cultures, blood draws can feel primitive. A hush washed over nearby tables, equal parts shock and fascination. I held her gaze and managed a nod, but inside, tectonic plates were shifting. I remembered the verse again, one blood, all nations, and for the first time it didn't sting. It burned like fuel. Weeks passed. We forgot about the swabs while finals and yearbook signings swallowed our attention. June arrived. The biotech company sent an email blast. Results reveal day. Expect surprises. An assembly was scheduled in the auditorium, complete with glossy PowerPoint slides and local news cameras trailing wires across the stage. The entire freshman class sat buzzing like electricity beneath the dimmed lights. A company rep outlined pie charts showing African, European, Asian percentages blending into kaleidoscopes. Kids whispered, gasped, elbowed friends. Then came the volunteer segment. Students whose parents had signed extra media waivers could come up, scan a QR code, and display their ethnic mix live on the giant screen. Nobody was surprised when Mrs. Hawthorne strutted forward on behalf of her class. She clutched the school iPad with the solemnity of a coronation. "Let's see," she cooed into the mic, "how global we truly are." Her bar graph loaded. 47% British Irish, 22% French German, 11% Scandinavian, 6% Ashkenazi Jewish, 14% trace ancestry, Southeast Asia. Murmurs rippled. She blinked, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and forced a laugh that sounded tinny. "Interesting glitch," she said, tapping the screen. The rep assured her the data was accurate. Social studies teachers in the front row leaned forward, predator curious. Whispers became waves. The rep then announced a twist meant to demonstrate the tapestry of hidden kinship. They had matched every student with anyone in the database who shared at least a great-grandparent. Most pairings linked kids to distant strangers across the globe, but the system had flagged one pair actually sitting in the same room. Live odds of that. 1 in 57 million. The auditorium lights popped on as house music thumped. We all scanned our badges at handheld readers. Screens around the room flashed names. My badge pinged. A spotlight erupted over my seat, and another pinned Mrs. Hawthorne at center stage. I heard nothing, saw nothing, except my feet moving without permission down the aisle. Cameras pivoted. The principal's jaw unhinged. The rep said phrases like statistical marvel and shared chromosome 7 segment. I noticed Mrs. Hawthorne's knuckles whiten on the iPad. She forced a smile so stretched it looked glued on. Into the mic she quipped, "Perhaps my gardener's family tree grew into mine," a joke dripping with the same acid she'd poured on my accent. Laughter sputtered then died. The rep, oblivious, pressed on. We matched at the level of half-first cousins once removed. Translation: her grandfather and my grandmother, siblings or half-siblings. The auditorium became an echo chamber of questions. My own thoughts spiraled. Lola Isabella, the grandmother who sang Tagalog hymns and prayed the rosary at dawn, had always said our Spanish surname came from a ship captain somewhere up the line. She'd never mentioned a white American soldier stationed in Manila in the 40s. I realized that the secret might have died with her the year before we emigrated. Looking at Mrs. Hawthorne's pale face, I imagined a boy, her father perhaps, born of romance or perhaps heartbreak in wartime Manila, shipped to the States, never spoken of again. History folded in on itself like origami. Someone, maybe the vice principal, suggested we end assembly early. Students filed out buzzing louder than cicadas at dusk. Mrs. Hawthorne cornered me backstage, her mascara already tracking. "I don't believe this," she hissed. "You, my student? It's impossible." I held my ground. "DNA doesn't care what we believe," I said quietly. For a heartbeat, I could see the 13-year-old inside her, shaking, walls cracking. Then she wheeled around and vanished through the stage door. Rumors exploded. Snapchat stories captioned, "Mrs. H's secret Filipino fam." TikTok edits mashed my classroom humiliation with her stunned face on stage. But virality is a double-edged sword. By dinner, local news anchors parked vans outside our apartment building. Papa ushered them away while Mama stood behind the curtain whisper praying. My phone blew up with interview requests. I ignored them, burying under geometry homework as if theorems could barricade real life. Yet some messages pierced the noise. Classmates texting apologies for laughing, allies I never knew I had. 3 days later, our principal mandated we meet with the school counselor, mediated, for closure. We sat across a tiny coffee table, steam coiling from untouched paper cups. Mrs. Hawthorne's eyes were red-ringed, voice brittle. "I can't undo the way I behaved. I am ashamed." Silence swelled. Counselor glanced at me. I inhaled, felt the sharp edges soften, and told her about the verse Mama loved: one blood, all nations. As I spoke, I realized forgiveness wasn't a moral trophy, it was self-preservation. Anger chained me to the moment she laughed. Grace severed the chain. We agreed to a plan. She'd issue a public apology to our class and design a unit on multilingual literature, co-taught with me as student consultant. The district loved the PR spin, diversity, reconciliation, but for us, it was raw penance. The first day back in room 2 to 19, she stood before the class, voice trembling. I weaponized my privilege. I humiliated a student who is, by blood, my own family. Gasps. I followed, heart hammering, and recited Shakespeare's Sonnet 116 exactly as I had on Humiliation Day. Accent unchanged, cadence proud. When I finished, the room stood, not the polite 3-second clap we reserve for assemblies, but a slow, roaring ovation. Somewhere in the back, the class clown wiped his eyes. The new unit blossomed. We read Filipino poet Jose Garcia Villa, Nigerian novelist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Guatemalan sermons, Irish laments. Mrs. Hawthorne let students teach phrases from home languages at the start of every period. Walls once plastered with SAT vocab now bore calligraphy in Tagalog, Hindi, Farsi. Even the seniors sneaked in to listen. School board reps dropped by with clipboards. State diversity coordinators asked for curriculum copies. The media storm pivoted from scandal to celebration. Yet the story's apex unfolded off-camera one balmy August evening. Mrs. Hawthorne rang our apartment buzzer unannounced, clutching a shoebox tied with twine. Inside lay black and white photos of a young Filipino woman in a nurse's uniform beside a U.S. Army lieutenant. On the back, faded ink spelled, "For my sister Isabella. May distance never erase love." The lieutenant's name matched hers. My Lola's name glimmered. Tears blurred my vision. We traced the timeline. Her grandfather had sailed home, married in Indiana, buried the story to protect a new life. My grandmother stayed, raised children on faith and frugality. Two branches bent by war had joined, 70-plus years later, in a fluorescent-lit classroom. Family is often forged in blood, but sometimes it's hammered out on the anvil of apology. Each confession an act of grace shaping a bond that biology alone could never guarantee. It begins the instant someone decides to pause, inhale, and recognize the fragile miracle of another person's dignity, even after every instinct has shouted, "Turn away." The woman who once unleashed a laugh like shrapnel across my confidence reinvented herself, class period by class period, until she was the steady hand over mine during college essay workshops, penciling gentle notes in margins she used to weaponize. Word spread, and soon her once intimidating classroom lights glowed late into the evening, a beacon for any immigrant kid whose tongue curled around English the way vines cling to new soil. She built a sanctuary out of spare desks and copy paper reams, where accents were rehearsed, celebrated, never erased. The results were seismic. Our motley crew of students, Nigerian, Guatemalan, Korean, Afghan, shattered the district record for oral interpretation qualifiers, stepping onto competition stages with voices that once quivered during roll call. Local churches caught wind and invited us to read scripture, poetry, and folktales in duet form. English braided with Tagalog, Farsi, Spanish, Chui. Those vaulted sanctuaries, once hushed under the weight of a single language, suddenly resonated like stained glass megaphones, scattering syllables in every direction. Parishioners wept, not because they understood every word, but because they finally felt how vast the word us could be. Through it all, my own accent never disappeared. It mixed with the cadences around it, caught a bit of valley uptalk here, a softened th there, until it became an audible roadmap of the journey itself. What once felt like a crack in my foundation revealed itself, as stained glass. Irregular pieces fused together, catching the light in ways a single pane never could. My speech proved, day after day, that words aren't broken merely because they arrive wearing unfamiliar music. They are living invitations to listen harder, translate more generously, and remember that every voice, however it lands on the ear, belongs in the chorus. Years later, on my first morning as a freshly minted UCLA linguistics major, I found myself wedged between cardboard boxes of dorm room essentials, refreshing my cracked laptop until the campus Wi-Fi finally cooperated. The new message ping echoed off bare cinderblock walls. "Welcome to the department," the subject line beamed, a digital trumpet blast. I clicked. The chair's memo laid out course numbers, office hour etiquette, and a reminder to buy earplugs for the annual phonetics party. But the line that hooked my breath sat alone at the bottom, set in italic Georgia font. Language is the roadmap of a culture. It tells you where its people came from and where they're going. In that instant, lecture halls, dining hall waffles, and the nervous thrum of 60,000 undergrads blurred. My mind rewound to a fluorescent classroom 3 states away. Mrs. Hawthorne's shaky laugh splintering the air, my own vowels trembling like fawns in headlights. The thunderclap of applause that later sanded my shame down to something almost smooth. I pictured humiliation as a jagged cliff face, every jeer a crashing wave that, over time, had ground the rock into sand fine enough to sift through confident fingers. Each mis-stressed syllable, architect, library, had been one more tide, relentless yet secretly constructive, sculpting me for the journey I hadn't yet glimpsed. Now, sitting beneath Southern California sunshine that smelled faintly of eucalyptus and ambition, I understood why the quote felt less like inspiration and more like cartography. Every accent mark in my past, every rolled R in Tagalog hymns, every borrowed Californian uptalk, every hesitant diphthong, was a pushpin on that roadmap. They traced a route from a parish in the Visayas to a strip mall ESL class, through a DNA assembly that split and then fused identities, all the way to this sprawling campus where students debated syntax the way others debated playoff brackets. I closed my eyes, letting the hum of skateboards on concrete drift through the open window, and whispered a quick thank you prayer, not for flawless pronunciation, but for the glorious, stumbling mosaic of sounds that had ferried me across continents and insecurities alike. Misplaced stresses, clipped endings, hybrid cadences. They were proof, etched into my very breath, that language is not a test to pass, but a vehicle to drive. And I, once ashamed of the sputtering engine under my hood, was now enrolled to study the machine, perhaps even to redesign it, so travelers after me could ride with the windows down and the music of their own voices turned all the way up. In the end, a single jeering laugh in a musty classroom detonated a chain reaction no one foresaw. A hidden bloodline revealed, a career transformed, a community awakened to the music inside its own walls. Accent became anthem. The day DNA unraveled our histories, it also wove them together, tighter than any grammar rule, brighter than any document stamped in triplicate. And that is how one student's trembling voice turned an entire class upside down, just long enough to set it right side up forever.